Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our discussion today. Is an executive level MBA worth it? Presented by the Quantic School of Business in collaboration with Ivy Exec. My name is Alex Baran-Perea. I'm one of our co-founders here at Ivy Exec, and I can't tell you how honored I am to be supporting this conversation today alongside Tom Adams, chairman and co-founder of the Quantic School of Business and Technology, and incredible EMBA graduates from the program, Fatima, Anna, and Belton. Unfortunately, one of our alum that we were hoping to join us today just couldn't join us because of unexpected circumstances, Ross Miller. But before we begin, we do want to make sure that we cover a few brief housekeeping items for our audience. As you could probably tell, all of our attendees are in listen-only mode. And so we do that to ensure a certain sort of quality of audio for everyone. However, we really do want to encourage you all to engage in this conversation by asking questions for our panelists. Tom will be moderating the discussion with our alum at the beginning. We will then transition over to a Q&A. Our guests will be answering questions throughout, but we certainly hope to have you participate by providing your questions and thoughts for the group that we have here today. Additionally, we are recording the conversation with our guests, so you can look forward to receiving a copy of that recording via email in the coming days ahead. And so now, it's my honor again to pass this over to Tom Adams, chairman and co-founder of the Quantic School of Business and Technology, to say a few words and introduce our guests. Tom?
Okay, great. And thanks, Alex, for the kind introduction. So, yeah, we have a great team of panelists, and I'm really looking forward to the conversations as well. And so first off is Anna Pfeiffer, and she's a results-driven e-commerce marketing executive that's got about 18 years of experience. She's currently director of consumer marketing at NetSuite, which is an Oracle institution. And she's sort of focused on advising all sorts of interesting companies on CRM and consumer experience and life cycle marketing strategies and the companies are like Etsy, Sunoco, Clinique, and Louis Vuitton and others. And then Fatima is this exceptional person that's one of the first fellowship-trained obesity medicine physicians in the world. She practices and teaches at Massachusetts General Hospital and the Harvard Medical School. And in addition to her MD and EMBA, Fatima holds an MPA from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. And then last but not least, we have Belton Flournoy. Belton's the UK Director of Digital Identity and Security at Protiviti, which is a global consulting firm. He has over a decade of experience deploying strategic solutions ranging from cybersecurity, customer experience, and compliance for some of the world's leading financial institutions. So just a great panel. And I guess to kick things off, I'd love it if Belton, you could talk a little bit to what kind of tangible benefits you might have gotten from the program, from the day you started until today. What did you get from doing an executive MBA?
Yes, thank you, Tom, very much. And it's really awesome to be introduced by yourself as well. I think, to be honest, I think that's the question that you all ask yourselves before you even decide to do an MBA. Am I going to get something from this? Is this going to help me in my job? Is this really going to be beneficial to me? What exactly am I going to learn? And as someone who had a business degree, I guess was asking myself a lot of those questions. I think the most surprising thing that I learned that I'm so grateful to have the experience with now is a macro level view of how I look at challenges and problems. So as somebody who works in a consultancy, I go out and advise clients on solutions every day. And I think the old way was, let me go read some of the industry reports, let me look at that and then kind of provide my viewpoint. I think the new way is, let me actually look at some of the global trends. Let me understand what are some of the trends that are happening in some of the up and coming countries. Let me look at the US, let me look at Australia, let me look at some of these other markets. Let me look at what the consultancies are focusing on in those markets, because maybe the UK is lagging or leading in certain areas. And all of a sudden that macro level view is really changing how I approach everything, both my client delivery, my personal life, and other things. So I think one of the things that I've learned the most from this program is that macro level view when it comes to addressing and providing solutions to my clients.
That's cool. And Anna, what about you in terms of like how folks perceive you having done or pursued an executive MBA? How does that sort of translate into a benefit for you in your career?
Yeah, I mean, it's numerous, right? I would definitely speak to kind of what Belton said about that macro level view. But then there's also been some kind of really specific things that have helped me out as well that have been a lot more, detail level. So I just think of, my background is originally in law. And so I didn't go to school for marketing. I didn't go to school for business. I came from an entrepreneurial family. So I had some experience there and have been involved in multiple startups. But I knew a lot of things just from kind of that self-taught aspect and, just others and being around, new startups and involved in those. So I knew a lot of things like on a conceptual level. I knew what it was, but I never knew what it was actually called in actual, MBA speak or business speak really. And so it's been really nice for that to kind of have that confidence come into play of knowing, hey, not only do I know what this is, I can actually speak to it in a way that, others in the business understand. So that's been something that, really was nice to bring to the table with my clients because, if they're mentioning things about their business and, I have to either, play along like I know and then look it up later, or I have to just admit I don't know. It's really nice to not feel like you have to do that and just know you can actually identify exactly the concept or the strategy that they're referring to.
Cool. And Fatima, in terms of you, and obviously you had tremendous career success in the medical field, but in terms of your pursuit of the Executive MBA and your sort of desire to maybe have more confidence or more, soft skills around leadership, how did the Executive MBA help you?
Absolutely, Tom. Actually, so I have a story to really kind of capture my thought about, why the MBA. And I really thought about the MBA, Tom, back in 1999, but I was told at that time I was too young. I guess I want to thank Quantic for not telling me I was too young to pursue the executive. But we're, obviously many, many years down the road, although I think I look similar to myself back in 1999 when I was first thinking about an MBA. What I've learned about medicine is that really a lot of how medicine is governed is by the business of medicine. While I'm able to make individual healthcare decisions for my patients, how the operations actually works is from a business perspective. And what I've found is that many of the people that are really leading healthcare, whether that's here in the United States or around the world, are people that have a significant business acumen. And so if I'm looking at roles, and right now, since I actually have done my MBA, I've taken on quite a few leadership roles here at my hospital and even at VC firms where I'm leading healthcare initiatives. I'm serving now as the Director of Equity for our endocrine division here at Mass General, the Director of Diversity for the Nutrition Obesity Research Center for all of Harvard Medical School, but then also serving as the Chief Health Officer for a startup that was started. And that actually was a job that I assumed during the time of actually pursuing my Executive MBA. So the timing was really paramount in terms of looking at how do I guide a new startup, but then also work in this well-defined academic field, particularly here at Harvard. So I've just found it very, very beneficial in terms of kind of taking that next step, climbing the leadership ladder, particularly here in academia, but also as I'm looking at startup businesses and serving in my role as Chief Health Officer for Chroma Health.
Cool. Very, very interesting. And Anna, in terms of like things you might have learned in your program on a Monday, and then we're able to apply it on a Thursday within the same week. Are there any sort of stories you have of that sort of experience where you had immediate application of what you were learning in the program?
Yeah, I think one of the best examples for that would be actually not, I do a lot of freelancing as well, so not a client in my role at Oracle, but another company, startup as well, that I'm basically forming, the marketing team as a solo person for now, just kind of helping them out. But them being in that kind of startup phase and that type of approach and stage of their business, it's been super helpful because my startup experience is a little further back in time. I definitely didn't go through those experiences with kind of the lens of the MBA, and so I feel like that has been really, really helpful to bring that to the table when working with this new startup, because I just totally think about it in a different way now. I think a lot more well-rounded, and kind of like Belton said, that macro level view that I feel like has just been really instrumental in bringing advice to that particular client for their startup.
Cool. And Belton, many wonder about the value of an executive MBA, and they ask, like, is it worth it? So how do you calculate the ROI? And when you look at alternative executive MBA programs, what makes you what made you make the choice that you had, or what do you think people should think about?
Well, let's see. When I first found out about Quantic, I was scared I was going to be scammed. I think I really was. I was like, okay, is this digital only? Am I really going to get value from this? Is this something that is actually really credible? I think, Tom, you being a part of it and with the Rosetta Stone background, that adds a lot of credibility, in my opinion, to it. But then two, when I started to do the research and I started to kind of read up about it, I think there were lots of publications that I respect that were starting to write articles about Quantic. And I think that was the first kind of teetering into maybe this is something you should consider. I think what pushed me over the line when it said, in order to apply, you have to do some of the intro modules. I did those intro modules and fell in love with the learning style. I absolutely loved it. I think I am someone who is at a stage in my career, so I'm probably a unique applicant where I'm at a stage in my career where I didn't choose to do my MBA so I could get a better job. I chose to do my MBA because I value learning, and I wanted to, I guess, jump on the bandwagon of so many people who said that you learn to do that macro level thinking and that big blue ocean type thinking through getting an MBA. When I started that journey, and now when I kind of talk to people about it, I think the biggest value that has come about is the helping to challenge the imposter syndrome that I have. I'm a director in a global consultancy. I advise some of the world's largest financial services institutions, and you go into a room and people look at you as if you are the expert. You almost have to feel that way. And I think sometimes we all self-doubt ourselves. We all say, "Am I really good enough? Do I really know what I'm looking at achieving?" And going through the MBA process, and one, realizing how much you actually already know was a beautiful thing. But then two, realizing that you reinvigorate that passion for learning. Like, not that I stopped, but I love learning, and going through Quantic and learning about topics that in college I used to say, oh, well, I'm never going to use this. Now I'm actually, again, sitting there in my room, struggling through a module saying, why did I ever choose to do this? But then you get over that and you're like, gosh, I loved learning about statistics again, or I love learning about leadership. And I feel when we have that imposter syndrome and when we have that little voice telling us in our heads that you start just questioning yourself, achievements like an MBA and achievements like spending weekends not doing anything but studying in Quantic, I think really you come out of the other side a lot stronger of an individual. And I think anybody who comes out, anybody who graduates, recognizes the amount of work that it takes, recognizes the amount of time you put into it, and that's the return on the investment. You're investing so much of your time, and you wouldn't do that if you didn't think you'd be getting value from it. And so for me, the learning and education was by far what made that most valuable, and now that's helping me to feel more empowered in my current role, and I can shut down that imposter syndrome saying I know I'm good enough, but I also have an MBA now to prove it.
That's great. And Fatima, how did you make your decisions on the Executive MBA and in terms of your timing, in terms of the program you pursued, where did that stem from?
Yeah, one of the things that really was appealing to me, particularly about Quantics, was this like online platform. And I think, like Belton mentioned in his answer, the interface was very user friendly. I felt like it wasn't one of these things that, we were in the middle of this pandemic, which obviously has not gone anywhere, but we're still in the middle of it. But how do you, be on a platform where you see a lot of people were really kind of putting something together that was really haphazard? This was thought out well before we went into a pandemic. So you could tell that this was a well-oiled machine prior to starting. And so I really like that it wasn't an afterthought to go to this kind of completely online platform. And I thought that was just really an ideal way to work within my constraints of my time. My schedule is quite demanding as a researcher, as an educator, as a physician. I work 80 to 100 hours a week. So how am I going to fit my 5th degree, which it was my 5th degree, into the middle of this pandemic, where healthcare workers were called upon to do some very heroic things, but also with the time constraints, but also wanting to get a value add, right? Which is, what am I getting out of the program? There were particular modules, for example, that felt very comfortable. Statistics is what I have to do a lot of in terms of my research as a research scientist here at Harvard. So that felt very familiar. And I was like, oh, I do this in my sleep. And then things like accounting, which I still hate, were things that were not as comfortable. And I'm very glad that we have wonderful certified accountants that do all of their series training and things so that I can utilize their services so that I don't ever have to do that again in my life. So, I found it really opening up my eyes to things that I thought I knew about business before, particularly as someone who had done my master's of public health and health policy and administration. I felt like, well, I've done some of these like kind of finance and cost and managerial accounting and these types of things, but the MBA was broader, right? It wasn't specific to healthcare. It allowed you to have a broader view, that macro view that both Belton and Anna are speaking about. So that I can think about healthcare, which is where I spend most of my time, but also think about how healthcare relates to the greater world. So that was what really appealed to me, was the usability, the idea that I can pick up and do, maybe half of a module in 10 minutes in between patients or between meeting or teaching some of my residents or medical students, et cetera, and then get back to it. And since I'm one of those people that kind of rapidly cycles through things, it appeals to my nature at baseline, and it allowed it to feel like I could take it in bite-sized pieces. And yes, while you did spend many weekends working on your materials, if I was doing it in bite-sized pieces like that throughout, I found that, only during those test weeks, which were stressful, was I really having to spend as much time. And then also on those big project weeks where you had like a big assignment due in a group setting that, that you had to put a much larger chunk of time in just like one dedicated setting. So it really just appealed to me in many different ways. And I think the key thing is that it was not an afterthought post-pandemic, oh, we need to scramble and create this online platform. That was already well thought out.
That's great.
I would second that too.
Yep.
Sorry, just commenting on what you said. I actually started on an additional certification program right now. I was doing that while I was working on the Quantic MBA, and this was a previously in-person program and kind of made virtual. And it was just a shocking experience to take that program and then compare it to Quantic, because it was like night and day in terms of how engaging it was for me. And it was just really different experience. It was exactly like you were saying, Fatima, it wasn't like an afterthought to make it that type of experience. It was, the way it was built from the ground up. And it's just night and day, like a better experience than a lot of the other online stuff that, I'm seeing for people to do for any, certifications or that type of thing. So definitely would echo that.
And yeah, fantastic. And so maybe just to go around the screen here in terms of the, you obviously went in to the program with certain goals that you had for your career and where you want to take yourself. Have you developed bigger ideas, or do you feel like you've got new goals that you didn't have before? And if so, what are they? And maybe Belton, you kick us off. I don't know if you've got reflections about where you want to take your career at this point.
Yeah, well, I guess I've always thought big. So I think in my mind I had this life trajectory that hasn't kind of changed too much. But I think some of the big additions to that trajectory now is one that macro way of thinking. So I just can't stress enough how beautiful it is to almost feel like I was just thinking so narrowly before. Because now if I want to think about a new job that I want, instead of me just saying, okay, what are the companies I want to work for, I might look at country market reports to look at country trends on top of what companies I want to look at, because then I know what the trajectory is. Before I would say, oh, I want to work in one of the major English speaking markets. Now I might say, actually, management consultant is growing hugely in Germany. Maybe I want to go to Berlin for a year. You know, I think that different way of thinking has definitely now opened my mindset to think completely differently. I think the other beautiful outcome of Quantic was, those of you who are unfamiliar with the program, Quantic has a lot of optional activities for those people who want to do more than the coursework, and that includes curated book clubs. And so I read a few of the books that Quantic had, I guess, articulated during that, which I really enjoyed. But when I did one of the leadership modules on effective leaders, I got so much value from that. And you asked on a question earlier, what did you learn Monday applied on Tuesday? Well, I took that effective leader course, and as a director of my firm, I got so much value from it that I actually created my own PowerPoint slides from the Quantic material, and then led a session for our country market leader and another of the managing directors, and walking them through the different leadership styles and how you could become a more effective leader in certain elements. But what it really taught me was things that we forget and assume are natural skills or natural abilities actually aren't. And so if you want to be a really great leader for a team, lots of us think, oh, that female is a great leader, that male is a great leader. We think that, and we think, I wish I was like them, but I'm not. And I literally crumple that thought up and throw it away now, because Quantic taught me that you can actually learn these things. You can learn to be a good leader. You can learn lots of these soft skills. And so if there are things that I think have changed my trajectory, it's you're never too old to learn something new. And if you want to, you can actually learn skills that you think are more ingrained in people as natural abilities, and you forget that. And so I think that's probably one of the best things I've learned, because now I'm reading a whole plethora of these books on how to become more, how to say no more to certain activities, how to be an effective leader, how to do some of those other soft skills that are just as important when it comes to business, but you may forget that you can learn them still.
Cool. Fatima, what would you say has changed in your trajectory, or in terms of your goals and what you're thinking about?
Yeah, I think that prior to starting the Executive MBA, particularly as a research scientist that spent, 25 plus years training to be where I am, you kind of think, you're just going to do academics, you're just going to do research, and you're going to teach, and you're going to see patients. But I began to broaden my perspective, and actually during my MBA, I filed my first provisional patent for technology that I had developed during the course of the MBA, and just recently filed my final patent for technology that I've developed while doing the Executive MBA in the middle of the pandemic. So I really was able to think more broadly about what can I bring that, like I said, will not just work on an individual patient level, but could have broad scale, I guess, opportunity for those that are around the world, not just even here in the US, which is where I spend a lot of my time. And I think that, this is a very different framework of thinking. Academics, and as an academic physician, we're trained to do a very narrow, set of things with regards to patient and patient care. But we often miss opportunities to apply our knowledge on a broader scale and actually, get a return for the work that we do. We kind of slave through things. And unlike Belton, I have never really had that imposter syndrome, so I didn't feel like I had that issue. And people, were kind of a little bit like, wait a minute, you're adding a fifth degree, like, what do you expect to get out of this? And these are the things I've gotten. I mean, I never really had the courage to file and go through and file that patent here in the US. until I was in the middle of this. And then I actually could directly apply this to what I was learning in some of the additional modules. Like we have to pick, for those of you who are unaware, there are certain modules that are that you have to do, and then there are some optional modules, and you have to do at least 3 of those in order to complete the requirements to graduate. But I kept finding additional modules that really supported some of my entrepreneurial thought process, but also some of my thought process about business as a whole as it relates to medicine. And it was so inspirational that I even encouraged my sister, who just finished her Executive MBA in August with Quantic, to apply. So usually little sisters don't always follow their big sister, i.e. me, but in this situation, she felt like it was a significant value add, despite the fact that we're in very, very different fields. And it wasn't also a bad deal to have me kind of, ahead of her by 3 different cohorts to kind of help her think through, some problems. So if you recommend it to your family, I think that really speaks volumes to, the value that you think you can glean. And for my little sister to see her finished in August, it was just great. Just another kind of added benefit of me having gone through the program and really kind of paving the way for her to consider it also.
That's cool. And Anna, you sort of made reference to it slightly and very modestly, but you started your own company early in life and sold it. And I'm just wondering, like with the MBA now, is that something that you could contemplate doing all over again, or how's the Executive MBA sort of landed with you in terms of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say to the last question. After having been involved in multiple startups that, some were successful, some weren't. I was also part of a startup with the company I've been at now for 11 years. That was by way of 2 acquisitions, one of the biggest tech acquisitions in, US history. I will say that was a different experience than the other startups and acquisitions I'd been a part of in the past. I think it kind of put a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth there. Sorry for the alert. But, because of that, I didn't really envision myself, founding another startup or being super involved in another startup. And then I totally got the bug again from being in the program. And it kind of made me want to do it again, almost just for the sake of doing it with the knowledge that I have now, because there's just so many things that I would have done differently, in the past in those startups if I did have all of the information and knowledge that I've gotten from the program so far. And, I think that's been kind of the biggest thing for me, is just kind of next step, just thinking bigger and being more likely to go down that path. Also for me, I think in general, the ROI for me was very easy to figure out, because my employer is actually reimbursing me for the whole cost of the program. And so I had originally thought about getting an MBA a long time ago, but I was already kind of too far in my career to where it made sense to pursue, some super expensive MBA, because I didn't really, need it at the time. And so I kind of waited around, and it just felt like the timing was right. And so, with the price of the program and my employer reimbursement, my only investment is my time. So I'm getting all of the benefit of the MBA and not even spending any money out of pocket. So I would definitely encourage folks to make sure, they don't have a program like that at their company that they could, potentially use to really lessen their personal investment, because, the money isn't even as valuable as my time, right? So for me, it was just a matter of, is the time going to be worth it? And I absolutely feel like it has been. And I think too, to kind of speak to Belton's point of, continuing to learn, the one thing that's just shocked me is how much fun the program is. I mean, even aside from the stressful, exam weeks and the big projects and that type of thing, I've actually enjoyed taking all of the coursework. And so I'm not going to say I enjoyed every single bit of my coursework back in undergrad or even, school growing up. So it's been really neat to go back to working on my education and actually enjoying it and being like, this is what I want to know about. It's not like I'm just taking classes just to take them. And so it's just been a lot more enjoyable because of that, I think.
That's great. Fabulous, Anna. And so we're getting questions in from the audience, and I encourage you to sort of field any questions beyond the ones I'm able to read out here. And so we've got a question from Michelle. How did you find your peer-to-peer learning experience in a digital learning environment offered by Quantic? What was that like?
I'd like to start, if you don't mind, Belton. I'm going to jump in ahead of you. I like to be first. Actually, I found it quite enjoyable. For many of my projects, you might have a group of like 5 of us, and we're on 5 different continents, and somehow they all seem to yield to my schedule because I have the busiest schedule. So I thought it was quite interesting to work on projects, work with people and, from all different facets of, industries and backgrounds, and come together, obviously, during the middle of a pandemic that all of us were feeling globally, and produce great work. So I really found that to be quite enjoyable. And I also like the fact that, each project you had a different group of people that you were working with. So it wasn't always the same set of people, which gave you a greater opportunity to learn about other individuals and their unique backgrounds, what brought them to the Executive MBA. And so that's something that I really thought was just exciting, to see the different levels that we were at with regards to those different modules, like those ones that we know that we're stronger at. I'm thinking about like some of Anna's comments in terms of things she felt, good about, things that she didn't feel as great about. She wasn't as, didn't have as much disdain for accounting, it sounds like, as I did.
I did.
But, it was just great to see that, those different people, come together. And even though we were doing it in a remote fashion, really still feeling like they were a part of a team, much like you would do in person, but you're working from all over the world to get, to the end goal of finishing, but to have a great experience while doing so. So that's my response to what that peer-to-peer interaction was like. And that was like a very commonplace theme with all of the projects that you had throughout the course of the program.
That's great. And Belton, anything you want to add on the peer-to-peer experience?
Yeah, I think I lucked out because in the UK, I started my program in March and lockdown happened in March. And literally I was sitting there in April, like in lockdown with everything closed. You couldn't even leave your house at the time. And I'm like, gosh, I'm so lucky to have started my MBA right now. But I think the beautiful thing about it is, if I think about how I engage with clients now, so since that month, I've actually been complete virtual at work. I've kicked off new projects. I've hired people. I've interviewed people, and I've just done a lot. And all of a sudden, I think if we hadn't have gone remote, Quantic already figured it out. Quantic knows how to engage people in a remote way that's meaningful, that allows you to work together, that really allows you to kind of work collaboratively. So I think Quantic has been that steady stream that kind of jumped on that COVID bandwagon before COVID forced so many other organizations to do it. I think the book clubs and the webinars you have where you actually break us out into breakout groups and let us actually engage and meet with each other, the networking portal that you have online. I think there's so many tools that Quantic thought about that enable us to work really collaboratively, both on projects and using Slack just to meet each other, that I think it's been great. And I think one of the things that lots of people do is, the old saying, you don't go to thing, you go to an MBA to meet people and to build your network. MBA, anything. I think now I have a really awesome network. Like I was looking at Fatima, your connections, and that's all through Quantic, I would assume. And so it's not only bolstered my LinkedIn, but it's bolstered my personal network too, where you're able to have that network of people. So I think it's a fantastic way of engaging. It was very seamless, and I've met some friends that I think might be there for the long haul as well.
And Anna, did you have a similar experience in terms of making friends in the program? We've got a question here from Afsar. Did you make any friends from the course that you kept in touch with, or maybe even met up with after the course finished?
I did. I actually ended up working with the same group multiple times. We just clicked on our first project, and so we ended up working together on future projects, and then also the big Capstone. And it's interesting. We are all based in the U.S. You know, we originally had an accountant on our team for the accounting project. He moved to another cohort, so we kind of lost him. But I just met some other, you know, women that are in a very similar industry as me. We're all over the country, different backgrounds and experiences and some similarities, but we just found that we work together really well. And I know I'll definitely, you know, stay in touch with those folks after the program's done for sure.
Okay, one more question. Wajid asks, how did you manage working on Capstone project? How involved was it, and what kind of time commitment did it require? Maybe Fatima, you can answer that one.
Yeah, I think my Capstone experience will be unique because I did my whole Capstone alone. A lot of it had to do with the demands of my schedule. I told you guys I work 80 to 100 hours a week, so that's a lot. And trying to coordinate the volume of meetings to do the Capstone to fit my schedule was like impossible. What I thought was interesting from Quantic, and they were very clear. They were like, well, you know, most people don't finish if they do the Capstone on their own. And I said, you haven't met me yet. So I did the whole Capstone, you know, by myself. And it was built on, you know, the same work that I told you with regards to the patent that I applied for. So putting that patent application together definitely helped me, you know, really think through how to think about putting together all of the work that was needed for the Capstone project. It really forced me to do some things that I've been thinking about for many, many years. And with it being my own project that I'm actually looking to launch in the near future, I really had to be in the trenches, and I had to do all of those uncomfortable parts, the parts that I like, the parts that I don't like, which you guys should all know which part that is. And I pushed through. And you know, the thing that I do like is presenting. So I really like the portion of the Capstone project where you're doing that pitch. That's like where I shine. I do on average 150 lectures per year in the US around the world in my topic area of obesity or disparity. So that's something that I enjoyed and was really excited about that portion, but also forcing myself to have this business plan that would convey what I thought were really challenging concepts to those that have no understanding of the work that I do. Really, you know, took me to in a different perspective, something I had never done in, like I said, my previous 4 degrees, and really, I think will help shape how I navigate the future. So that was my Capstone experience, which I think is unique because very few of us do it alone. And listening to my sister, who I said, who finished hers subsequently, who did have a group, I was slightly jealous of the fact that she had different people that were doing portions of the project. And I do think, you know, working in a group setting is ideal if your schedule allows, but my schedule just did not allow that as a healthcare provider going through this pandemic.
Got it. That makes sense. Anyway, great experience.
And I finished. I'm here.
We're impressed. And Aisha's asking a question here specifically to Belton, but you know, any of you can answer it, but maybe Belton, you take a crack at it first. But she's asking, you know, if you could give one piece of advice to a young professional, knowing what you know now, what would you say? And that's obviously broader than the Executive MBA, but maybe within the context of the Executive MBA experience and what you've derived from it, what's your advice to someone who's sort of earlier in their career? Maybe, Anna, do you want to pick up on that and sort of give us your 2 cents on what to think about, you know, in terms of your career?
Sounds good. I think two pieces of advice. One, if I had known how the program was going to work and how much I was going to enjoy it and get out of it, I probably would have done it sooner. So that's one thing. If I, you know, was going back and talking to myself, you know, 10, 15 years ago, I'd say go ahead and make that move sooner. And then the other piece I think is, you know, going back even further than that, and we might not have too many folks who are in that boat right now that are listening, but I would say I personally put a lot of pressure on myself, you know, in undergrad and shortly thereafter to really, you know, make a decision of what my career path was going to be for life at that point in time. And, you know, I made what I thought was the decision. And, you know, when you are in school and taking classes, you know, things can seem a certain way. So then when I got out of college and then I started actually working at law firms, I quickly realized that it just absolutely was not for me. And you know, I think that at that point I felt really lost because I didn't really know what was next. And so knowing what I know now of kind of how that changed my trajectory and how I ended up where I really wanted to be long term, I would have probably just told myself not to stress out about it as much back then and just say, hey, like just try things out to get experiences, to figure out what it is you want to do. Don't force yourself, you know. I mean, anything from working in different industries or areas to, you know, even taking some time off and waiting tables or bartending or something. I learned more from bartending in terms of my relationships with my clients than I did from some of my actual, you know, business positions. So there's all different types of ways and roles and things you can do and experiences that brings you these tangible pieces that you can apply to your day-to-day in the career that you actually end up in and want to be in.
Well, phenomenal. We've got a question here. I'm going to take it because it's like, is the Quantic Executive MBA accredited? And the answer is yes. So we're nationally accredited here in the United States and have been for over a year and a half. All right, one more to any of you panelists. What advice would you give to someone sort of entering the program in terms of improving their odds of getting through it and getting the most out of it? What would you give to someone who's sort of prospective and looking to enroll? And Belton, if you're able to come through, we'll take you because we haven't heard from you. But otherwise, we'll get
yes. Yes,
okay,
can
great.
you hear me perfect enough?
Yeah. Now we...
So I guess I'll go back to that first question just because I think that's really, I had an answer that I was trying to say, but there's a term called Locus of Control, and it's a behavioral economics term. And if you have an internal locus of control, you feel that you control your own life. And someone like Fatima, who has 5 degrees, she is definitely in charge and just trucking ahead and getting what she wants done. And I think that's a really powerful and amazing thing. Now, some people have an external locus of control where they believe society is the one that impacts them. So that's when you say, I'm not going to do good because I'm being overworked by this person, or you kind of blame other elements. And I think recognizing that those two different locuses of control exist is quite powerful, because if you make sure you have that internal locus mindset saying, I can achieve anything I set my mind to, and I can do anything I set my mind to, you will be so much more successful. And so I think if you're a young person starting your career out, always realize that you can do anything you want, you can achieve anything you want. If you ever hear a no from anybody, you can actually say, I'm not listening to that no, I'm going to do it anyway because I want to. And so I think that's a really important thing to learn at a quite young age, that locus of control. Now, going on to the tip of what can you do in Quantic to be successful, and pulling that through, I think you get what you get out of the program. So, for example, the tests are all open book. So if you wanted to, you could not study as much and literally have it open and look up every answer as you're doing your exam. Again, are you really going to get the most out of a program like Quantic if you do that every time? No, I don't think so. And so I think by actually investing the right time in the modules while you're doing it, what I did was I made sure to get a 100% as part of every single quiz before I did the exam. So I do the quizzes and then make sure I get 100%. And then I would do the exam. That is just a really small tip, but going through it and making sure you do 100% all the quizzes can really help your chances of doing well, and not just doing well, but doing well and remembering it once you finish.
Cool. And yeah, and one more. So what sort of career development support did you get to leverage, that you could leverage in your the Executive MBA career? Maybe, did you...
Can you repeat that? I missed just a little bit of that.
Did you seek any sort of support in terms of career development, like either getting any advice about how to, work on your resume, like services like that we provide to students? Did you use any career services in the program?
I did. I did 2 consultations. I did one for my resume and one for my cover letter. So I had 2 separate dedicated sessions. I had previously done that through a service and had gotten some feedback that I thought was pretty good. So I felt like I kind of already had all the feedback I needed. But with the gosh, I'm forgetting her name. The counselor that I spoke to and did the review, she sent this amazing outline of everything we talked about and all of the tips and tricks of things that I should tweak on my resume to make it, 100%. So I found that very helpful. I mean, that's a paid service in a lot of places, and so that was a nice free kind of add-on that I definitely took advantage of. And I've also taken a lot of the additional kind of optional webinars and that type of thing, where sometimes they aren't even necessarily directly related to the coursework. They're more like, for instance, I attended one that was all about how to interpret job descriptions. Like, what is this job description really, entail? What is it, describing? What are the skills needed and that kind of thing. So some of those extra types of webinars like that were really helpful for career development as well.
That's great. And would you add anything to that, Fatima or Belton, in terms of the services?
So my field is very specific in how they want things. So for example, Harvard has their own CV and I have to follow their rules. So I couldn't particularly use that, but I did like the fact that there were so many different resources available. Sometimes you felt really overwhelmed by the number of things that you could take advantage of. So I do want to acknowledge that there were a lot of things that were available, that just the volume of things that are coming through, the volume of notifications of things that you can do in addition to just the coursework in terms of improving yourself can be, it's, a lot, which means that there are a lot of offerings, and it really appeals to, the heterogeneity of us as individuals in terms of what we need to really kind of move our careers to the next level. And so I just want to speak to that. I was always impressed with the volume and the selection. And so I'm happy to hear that Anna was able to take advantage. My CV is 140 pages, but that's the Harvard CV, and they will not let me change it. So if you guys ever want to take a look at it, I do publish it online. It's great reading for the weekend. If you just have nothing to do this upcoming weekend.
That's funny. Anything, so maybe the last question would be whether you have anything to add in terms of beyond what you've already said in terms of the value of an executive MBA. And maybe we'll start in order here with Belton. Would you like to go first?
Yes, well, I'm going to ask a question as well. In fact, when it comes to you, I'd love to hear what your other 4 degrees are. Now, as part of anything else to add, I think one of the things that I think is really useful to say for any of the non-US audience that might be listening in is, when I moved to the UK, one of the big differences I learned about people getting jobs here is, in the US, to get hired into many business fields, you have to have a business degree. And then I come to the UK, where they care somewhat more about the university you went to, so you can actually get a philosophy degree and then get a job at a consultancy in business. So the degree doesn't necessarily correlate to what job you get. And so I think a degree like Quantic is extremely beneficial to someone who might have had that philosophy degree, went into a very niche or specialized field, but then actually doesn't understand the foundations of so many of the courses that an MBA provides you with. Because one of the things that this Quantic MBA does provide you with is the marketing, the accounting, the finance, the entrepreneurial, the leadership. And so it gives you a really strong foundation. So if you've ever come from a non-business degree, or if you specialize and you forgot some of those other areas, it's a fantastic way to kind of really upskill in a variety of areas. I think that's just kind of worth mentioning again.
Great. And Anna, maybe in terms of adding to the question of anything you want to add in terms of the value of the Executive MBA?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that this is more of a kind of value of the program, not necessarily what you're getting out of it, but just the way that the coursework is organized. And Fatima kind of nodded to this earlier. A big part in deciding to pursue the MBA or not is really all about the time that's required. And so I think the fact that it was built in a way that was so bite-sized, like she said, and made it like easily consumable in like short bursts of time, is just something that is really, really strong about the program that you might not get unless you actually started taking some of the, you know, the introductory coursework or even get into the coursework. And so I think that's something that I wish I kind of understood better before I went into it, because it probably would have made it a little bit less of a, you know, weighty decision in my head of do I have the time for this or not, because I really felt like, you know, in my past, I was more of a carve out 2 hours and sit down and really focus, you know, kind of person from an educational standpoint. And so that was something I didn't realize, you know, I didn't know if I'd have the ability to do that now. So that's one thing that I've gotten out of the program is like, oh, I really can like kind of jump around and do this, fit it in when I have time. That I didn't think was going to be as easy to do as it is. And that's been really, really helpful in being able to not only get through the program, but also stay on track. Because I think, you know, the one thing I have seen with folks that didn't or haven't yet finished through the program is just more that they let themselves get behind. And I think, you know, you get weekly reminders telling you where you should be. There's a full schedule out for the whole, you know, year. And so it was, you know, very easy to know where you needed to be. And I think the people that let that slip and got too far behind, that's where they had trouble being able to, you know, move forward, have the momentum in the program and to finally graduate. And so that's just something I would point out, is use the fact that you can consume this easily and quickly to make sure you stay on track, you know, to help yourself so that you end up, you know, finishing the program. Because obviously that's what we all want. But yeah, I think that would be one thing I'd point out about the program as a whole.
And Fatima, maybe what do you think you could add to the conversation finally? Anything we haven't covered?
Well, absolutely. So I feel like I have to respond to both Belton and then also give Anna some kudos for somehow the way she really captured it. So Belton said, what are my degrees? I can do this in about 30 seconds. You guys can time me. So my bachelor's of sciences in in anthropology and human biology was a dance minor. So I'm trained in ballet, jazz, West African hip hop, and point. My first master's was in public health and health policy and management. My next degree was my doctorate, my medical degree. My next degree was my mid-career master of public administration at the Harvard Kennedy School in politics and government, and then my EMBA. Did I do that in 30 seconds? Hopefully I did. With regards to Anna, I think Anna brings up some really key points. As someone, and I'm going to go back to Belton also and use this internal locus of control, which is quite high, and myself, I really enjoyed the fact that you had these milestones. I'm all about meeting milestones and passing them and getting there before the deadline. I actually pride myself on trying to beat the deadline. So, you know, getting those weekly reminders, I wanted to have everything done before the reminder came out, Anna, so that I could make sure that I felt okay. Because I usually had so many other things on my plate that I felt like if I kind of took it right until the, you know, into the deadline, that there was a potential that I could get behind. And that is an uncomfortable space for me to be in general. And so I really like to see that, oh, that reminder came and, oh, I finished it before then. It was kind of like my own way of making sure I finished. But I think the bite-sized pieces, going back to that, and the, you know, how you're able to carve this to fit your personality. As someone that, you know, is very driven as an individual, I was able to do that on pace without feeling like, you know, we're in a competitive setting. I mean, it was competitive with yourself. And I think that that's the key thing that I want people to take. Also, like I said, getting back to that heterogeneity of who we are, just even looking at the differences between Belton, Anna, and myself, and Tom, you know, we'll throw you in there too. I think you get a chance to see how different this will appeal to different people for different reasons. And you can get a lot out of the program by just trying to figure out what you need and how you can individualize this to fit you and your career trajectory. So that's what I'd like to add to both Belton and Anna's wonderful comments as like my response.
Well, Fatima, Anna, Belton, you've been terrific panelists. Thanks for sharing your insights and your perspectives. Obviously, we hope that many come to us and explore learning opportunities at Quantic. But in general, we hope that you found this interesting and that you consider an Executive MBA and that, maybe, as Anna said, it's sooner rather than later, because it really is incredibly empowering from my experience and that of many of our students. So with that, over to you, Alex.
I can only speak to myself because I haven't asked the attendees, but that was 1 hour that was incredibly insightful. I can't thank you all enough for the time, the authenticity through which you shared your journeys with us. I did want to ask one question. I think this is something that I am very honored to ask, and that is, all of you, including Tom, you are trailblazers in my eyes, and I'm sure in the eyes of many that are in the audience today. Each of you took a bit of a risk, in a sense, in pursuing the journey. For you, Belton, Fatima, Anna, in pursuing a Quantic EMBA. The types of credentials that each of you have, the types of backgrounds that each of you have, you could name the business school that we all associate top tier institutions, and you would have been admitted, I have no doubt. But you took the risk to blaze your own trail and, in a sense, be pioneers through the Quantic experience. So my question is actually for you, Tom. What inspired you to do what you did? Belton referred to this, and that is, you were very forward thinking in designing Quantic well before the pandemic, and in a sense, very well positioned with sort of where the world of work went starting in January, February 2020. So what inspired you to now have this?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I think that the answer would have to be that my life experience. So I went to business school myself and got an MBA from INSEAD, and found that, again, very much like the panelists have said, to be extremely empowering, because suddenly you could ask questions in any domain and interpret the feedback you got. And so you could essentially manage much bigger projects, think much bigger than you could have before. I was more of a technician in business originally, and I became more of a generalist. And so I wanted to pass on that kind of empowerment more broadly than the traditional schools have been able to. Obviously, we hold traditional schools in high regard. We think that they do a terrific thing for their students, but it's very hard to access. And specifically, I think for folks that, let's say, are more mid-career and sort of miss that window in their late 20s when most people attend a traditional business school, we are really, I think in your words, trailblazing the sort of democratization of the quality executive MBA. And the stories we get from our students is the sort of fuel that fires us. So many capable people are sort of stuck in this land of having not the confidence to go forward with dreams that they have. And so when we hear from them how, folks who were sort of, maybe not as many degrees as Fatima, but sort of have, pursued an advanced scientific education and have a PhD in some field and so on, but they feel like they can't actually build that company or take the promotion that they think is within reach. And we sort of talk to them at the end. It's incredible. And so it's that sort of human impact that we're able to have that really inspires us. And obviously, there's a bit of divergent thinking in us. We think that the traditional e-learning providers don't do it right. It's not interactive enough. It's not peer-based enough. They don't select peers carefully to make sure that, there's healthy peer dynamics where people are learning from each other as much as they are from us as the education provider. But primarily, obviously, we're excited about how we're able to help pretty incredible people do more.
Thank you, Tom. I think just to underscore, what you've done is democratized the high quality nature of what an executive MBA experience could be. Fatima, you mentioned heterogeneity. You all represent such unique backgrounds, and I certainly expect many of those that attended our discussion today will want to learn more about the Quantic Executive MBA program. So we invite those that have questions to reach out to Ivy Exec, members of the Quantic team. And thank you all for your time, and we look forward to hearing from you all again in the future. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.